Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Please go to am950radio.com and stream us live there. And I've got some other places where you can stream us too. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe there. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Please, thumbs up. I know I'm come to you at kooky times. But I have to get through the campaign. And once we do that, we're going to get back to the mornings. And please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. The Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Become my friend there. We're streaming there as well. And I'm also on X at Santita J and the Santita J Show. We've got a lot going on today. We've been talking about hurricanes Helene and Milton, and the just incalculable damages that have been really levied against Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, a couple of other states. It's just been absolutely stunning. Stunning. It's going to take years for them to recover. But many people are wondering, where is their money? They need the money. Of course, our government officials, unfortunately, are calling misinformation, the stories that people are giving you about the monies to which they do not have access, the help that they have not been able to get. And we do not doubt the good intentions of the good people who work in the vineyards of the Homeland Security Department and the Department of Defense. I mean, you have a lot of people, they just go in there wanting to do the best work possible, the Red Cross. But something's being lost in the translation here. Secretary Mayorkas said, look, FEMA does not have enough money to get us through this particular crisis. Now, some government officials, John Nichols, my brilliant brother from The Nation magazine, your national correspondent, they call that a conspiracy theory. I said, no. I heard him say it, and he has said it. And other people, the IG, the Inspector General said, look, they're sitting on billions of dollars. The fact is, I don't care where that money, I don't know about all of that. I do know this. You have a lot of people who are hurting. You have a lot of people who don't have electricity, John. You have a lot of people who are sitting with water that is poison, because water that has been sitting and standing, that is collecting all of this waste, that's dangerous for people. If you have a cut, that could endanger your life. It's just a lot that's going on, and people need answers, and they need attention. And all of these troops that we have deployed all over the world, perhaps many of them need to come home now and take care of Americans, take care of their own families. I know they would like to do that, and they could do that. These people go in to serve. So we've got a lot to talk about. I mean, where would this money, this $22.76 billion that we already allotted inside of a year to just this Israeli conflict, this attack upon Gazans alone. Wow, where could that money have gone? And we found out from William Hartung of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, that John Nichols, Congress has a threshold. If you stand underneath the threshold, you do not have to report monies that come out of their till, and they can just send it over to wherever they want to. This has been skirted more than 100 times just to sneak money into that conflict. And I'm hearing, as I listen to Washington Journal, I listen at some point during the day, and I love it because they open up the phone lines and they just let Republicans and independents and Democrats talk. And people are saying, wait a minute, all this money that's going over here, I need it right here, right now. I mean, John, beyond the election and beyond the fact that no one's talking about how these people are going to vote, John, I mean, help me, John Nichols, what are we looking at? Let's start with the money. Because we need money. People need money. I mean, if you have to move, you have to have money to do that, John. Most people can't do that. Most people can't just pick up and move when the mayor tells you, get out of here or you're going to die. Many people, they're waiting for the next paycheck. John Nichols, help me. What?
Well, I mean, it's not a complicated thing at all. This is super easy.
Okay.
We're the richest country in the world. We have more than enough money to do whatever we want to do. That's the beginning point of any discussion.
Okay.
Anybody that tries to distract you from that, anybody that suggests that there's something more complicated than that, wants you not to know that we can solve whatever problem is ahead of us, right? And we can solve it quickly, immediately. But unfortunately, politics gets in the way of the simple reality. Now, the simple reality is that we had, as an example, the COVID pandemic. It hit in 2000 in late February into March. Within weeks, we had allocated more than $1 trillion for immediate response to it. Where did that money come from? Well, we needed it. We had it because we are the richest country in the world. Over the next couple of years, we allocated trillions of dollars to respond to the pandemic. And what did we do? We created a child tax credit, among other things, which lifted children out of poverty. We literally came to the edge of ending child poverty in America in the midst of a pandemic. The money was there. We allocated it. We did it. Similarly, we kept families from falling into deep poverty, from losing their homes by a series of interventions. We sent people checks. We put restrictions on foreclosures, things of that nature, from kicking people out of their apartments. We also said, you know what? This is such a complicated, terrible, difficult time. You don't have to pay your taxes for 6 months, a year. You can delay when you're going to pay your taxes, and everybody did, right? And you think, well, when you do things like that, that would destabilize the country. It would fall apart. It would collapse. It didn't collapse. In fact, we came through the pandemic, and then in the post-pandemic era, where we, by the way, allocated trillions more to deal with the economic challenges related to that. That's something that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris did. We now have a booming economy, not a perfect economy, right? Not one that does all the things it's supposed to do, but we didn't collapse as a country. We didn't fall apart. And so the bottom line is we have not just enough money, Santita, we have more than enough money in America. It's ridiculous how much we have. We have so much that we can establish tax policies that allow a handful of people, billionaires, to pocket so much money to fail to pay their fair share, to such an extent that we now talk about the point at which, not the possibility, but the point at which someone will become a trillionaire, right?
Unbelievable.
I know. So the money's there. We're awash in money. It's everywhere, except where it should be, because we have politicians who intervene with priorities which are not those of the great mass of Americans. We know from emergency situations that we can deal with anything, that we can overcome any challenge. But in the day-to-day operation of government, what do? First and foremost, and this is even above the Pentagon, we make sure that the very, very wealthy, the super rich, remain super rich. That's the first priority. And if you don't recognize that, you miss everything else. Because there's a famous story from when George W. Bush was president. George W. Bush initiated massive tax cuts for the rich. By the way, during in the aftermath of 9/11, right? At a time when the country had gone through terrible trauma, all sorts of difficulties, massive tax cuts for the rich. And then Bush narrowly gets reelected in 2004 in a very contested election. And what did they do immediately afterwards? This is from a book written by the Treasury Secretary in the administration. Dick Cheney says, well, we got to do more tax cuts for the rich. And George W. Bush said, well, didn't we already do that? And Cheney put his hand on Bush's hand and said, stay with the program, right? Remember what we're here to do. And this was in the midst, we had a war in Iraq. We had gone through 9/11, everything else. And yet, first priority, cut the taxes for the rich. Okay. So that's the first thing to understand. Then once you've cut enough taxes for the rich, then you make sure that the defense contractors, the people who make weapons, the people who literally lobby on behalf of war, not on behalf of money to make weapons, they lobby on behalf of war, right? They want an unstable and difficult world. These folks get all the money they need and more. We literally have a situation where on a regular basis, when the Pentagon budget is drawn up, the Pentagon says what they think they need, which is excessively much, right? And then more is added to it. Congress after Congress, administration after administration. So once we understand this, that we give away massive amounts of money to the wealthy, we pour money into the Pentagon for weapon systems that are not needed, for wars that are not needed, for military programs that are not needed. Then we come back and we say, you know what? We can't afford any more of that child tax credit. We can't afford health care for all, even though every other developed country can. We can't afford free education, even though most other developed countries do it. We can't afford to deal with a natural disaster, even though most countries do it, without a blink of the eye. The fact of the matter is the money is there. We can afford to do it. It is simply a leadership crisis. And that is not a crisis of, people struggling to figure out what to do. No, the crisis is that too often those in positions of leadership in the United States do exactly what Dick Cheney said to George W. Bush. They stick with the program, and the program is to make the rich richer and to make sure that the Pentagon and the defense contractors have more money than they know what to do with.
We're talking with John Nichols of The Nation magazine about what to do about our money.
Mm-hmm.
John, I think
and it is our money.
It's our money.
Yeah, we produce it.
It's our money.
We produce it.
Yeah. And that's what brings me to, as we look at, what is it, Bezos and Musk, they're on track to become trillionaires, and others. What about, and I listen to these people who are struggling with hurricanes Helene.
Horrible situations. Yeah.
And they're but for the grace of God. Oh, it's overwhelming. And they are saying, look, we need money, and you've got the insurance. And the way our disaster relief system is built in this country, it really is on you.
Yeah. Well, look, here's what we do. First off, we tell you to abandon your home, which we'd let you build because we have zoning laws, or we have at least some measures, some restrictions, even in Florida, although not many, I'll admit. But there are rules, there are restrictions of where you can build. We let you build a house there, right? And then, in a matter of, Santita, think about this. This is within a month. We've told you twice, oh, you got to get out of there. You can't.
No, wait a minute, or you'll die.
Right, you're going to die. So you do what you're told. You get out and you move to higher ground or safer ground. And then you come back and you see the wreckage of what happened, where government let you build, where insurers let you build, where the public and the private sector let you build. Even that may have been a bad idea, but they let you do it, right? Then they say, my gosh, there's an awful lot of paperwork you're going to have to fill out now, right? You may get some benefit. Maybe we'll help you out some, but you're going to have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. And you're like, well, hold it. You said this was a place, we developed this. Cities were built here. This was done. If it was a bad idea, why do you tell us it's a bad idea now when we've lost everything, right? Why didn't you tell us it was a bad idea at the time? The answer to that is not a failure of government. Well, it is a failure of our politics. The answer to that is a failure of capitalism. And, it's just a simple reality. We had businesses, insurance companies, others developers who wanted to develop that land along the shore because it's so beautiful and you get to look at the ocean, all that. So they did. And now we're in this difficult situation. Going forward, there's a lot of planning we ought to do. As a country, Scoop Jackson, who used to be the senator from Washington State, proposed a national land use planning program back in the 1970s. He said, we're growing so fast. We have to figure out where we can develop, where we should, where the wetlands are, where the safe places are, because we don't want to have natural disasters overwhelming us. You know what happened? The insurance lobby and everybody else, they pushed them aside. They threw that legislation out. So now we're in this situation. Do we need to revisit it? Of course. But
Absolutely.
the first thing we need to do, we can couple these things. We can say these go together. First thing we have to do is to make sure that those people who lived in those difficult places, that they be made whole, right? They've got to, it doesn't mean that they necessarily will rebuild. There may be arguments against rebuilding in some places, and I respect that very much. But at the very least, it can't be that a natural disaster came to the richest country in the world and suddenly people are impoverished and homeless.
But John, and that is the key, because we make Wall Street whole. I mean,
Always.
who can forget the head of Goldman Sachs coming to Nancy Pelosi on a Friday afternoon with a 2.5-page document, and he said, "I need $770 billion right now. If you don't give it to me, we're going to collapse the economy on Monday."
Yep.
Americans heard about that. We went crazy. We shut down the communication system of Congress. Then they rejiggered the system so that would never happen again. Only a few of us can get through. Hey.
And you know what?
Can Americans be made whole, John?
And
We
you know what
will make Americans whole.
Let's go back to that 2008, 2009 period, right? Democrats and Republicans got together and they made Wall Street whole. But why? What was the crisis? It wasn't a Wall Street crisis. It was a housing crisis, right? We had a housing bubble that collapsed. So we had all sorts of working class people. By the way, disproportionately people of color.
Yes.
Who had worked and struggled and bought a home. It was their vehicle by which they would begin to build up wealth. They got wiped out. We didn't rebuild the economy from them upward, right? Make them whole. And knowing that if the person who bought a little house in Columbus, Ohio, or Indianapolis, Indiana, if they could be able to keep their house, that they got the resources they needed, that money would bubble up through the economy and ultimately make Wall Street whole. It would have, by the way, right? We could have actually done it right. We could have made working class people who owned homes whole and then made the whole rest of the economy work. But the people at the top of the economy said, no, let's cut the working class people out. Let's cut the homeowners out, even though it's their crisis, right? The challenge that's been imposed on them by us. Let's cut them out. Give us all the money. And that's what we did. We gave them all the money. And we left the homeowners high and dry. Many of them did lose their homes. And we run a similar situation, a similar danger now, that we have a couple of natural disasters that have hit not just Florida, but the Carolinas, parts of Georgia. I mean, this is pretty sweeping. This is the southeastern United States is in major crisis. We should make people whole. Right? Now, again, does that mean they're going to rebuild exactly where they were? Maybe not in some cases. Maybe there will be rebuilding in other locations, maybe a little higher up on the ground, maybe, something. But the bottom line is that people ought to be able to live essentially where they're from, where their family is, where their people are. We don't force people out of a place. We figure out how to make that place work. And then the second thing is, though, we never, ever say to people who've spent their life saving, spent everything they've got, put it into a house, now you're ruined. That doesn't have to happen in America. It doesn't have to happen. And frankly, this is what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz ought to be saying. And they should not be saying it in the moment today. They ought to be saying it in the tradition of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party in the 1930s, in a Great Depression, why did the Democratic Party become such a powerful force in America? Why did it win election after election after election? Because in a very difficult moment, they pulled people out, not all people, and they didn't do as well as they should have, but they pulled a lot of people out of a trap that would have taken them to deep poverty. Mm-hmm. And here's what Franklin Roosevelt said, 1936, running for re-election, standing at Madison Square Garden, 2 days before the election. It says, all of Wall Street's against me because I didn't give them enough money. All the investors are against me because I didn't give them enough money. All the bankers are against me because I didn't bail them out as much as they wanted. They're all against me. And Franklin Roosevelt said, I welcome their hatred because I decided I had a place to put the money. I decided to put it with working class and poor people. That's what Walz and Kamala Harris should be saying today.
And that is, to me, the real deal. Not just it was the New Deal, but that's real deal, right?
It's a constant
And,
deal.
and I'm just trying to find it. I mean, and not only should they be saying it, John Nichols, they should be making that happen.
Yeah.
Is it
Because they're
because,
not without power.
I mean, help me though. I mean, because that's not happening. And I saw the press conference that the vice president and the president had yesterday with Secretary Mayorkas and others. And I did not appreciate basically being told that I did not hear what I heard. He said we don't have enough money to get through this crisis. I didn't. He said it. I'm
Yeah,
like,
which is an
what?
absurdity. And why even have this argument,
But
right?
he put
Why
it
even
out
have
there.
this argument?
He
The
put
answer is very simple. He did say something that was absurd, right? And also calls into question whether he really should be in this position, because if you can't figure simple stuff like this out, that when there's a disaster, your job is to say, we have enough money,
it
we're
was a
going to deal with it.
heck of a job Brownie moment from the Katrina.
Yeah,
Remember that? I
I
mean, so
do.
I've got about 5 minutes here. You got them, because this election moment,
Yeah.
and more than that, this is this human moment. People can't take anymore. They
Right.
just can't. I mean, before this crisis, before these hurricanes, people couldn't afford to go to the grocery store. Well, they had to put things back at the grocery store.
Right.
So
People, look, inflation's going down. There's some stabilizing of some of these challenges. It's not enough. But when you're then hit with a natural disaster on top of it,
gosh.
right? Even if maybe things were starting to stabilize a little bit, for an awful lot of people, millions of people now, they're getting more difficult again. I think here's the bottom line. Do I think Mayorkas is a problem? No, I do not. Republicans love to focus on a personality that somehow, this is the problem, we're going to deal with that. That is the most bogus. Anybody who does that, you should run screaming from the room, right? Because if they're telling you this person's the problem, look, in any situation, there's always somebody who's going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. They're going to stumble. They're going to make a mistake. I don't care. What I care about is when we come back to them and we say, hold it, did I hear you say that? Or, is what's going on here? What I want is people with power to say, as they did during COVID, we're not going to let this thing fall apart. And you know what happened during COVID when they said, we're not going to let this thing fall apart. We're going to get those loans out. We're going to get that money out to people. We're going to send people checks. We're going to do the child tax credit. We're going to do all these things, right? When they did that, they just didn't nickel and dime it, right? They said, you're going to get what you need. And was it always enough? No, absolutely not. Mistakes were made. That's always true. But clearly the intent was to get us through. And that ought to be government's message right now. Our intent is to get people through. Now, this is one thing I will tell you. Donald Trump has been a horrible player in this moment. He has exploited it for political purposes. 2 weeks ago, he was running around saying people are eating cats and dogs, right? Then he's got something new. He's saying, oh, they're blocking the helicopters, or they're doing this. They're trying to harm you. Trump is always going to tell a lie to try and advance himself politically. That's something to understand. But the counter to a lie is not constantly trying to correct it, right? The counter to a lie is to do the big thing that actually solves the problem, right? It makes the lie seem as absurd as it is.
But wait a minute. But also, sometimes the liar is telling the truth.
That can't happen.
They said that about these planes in Greenville, South Carolina, and that's where my people are from.
Yeah.
And I heard that from people down there. See, because people on the ground don't have access to their resources, which is the government, right?
And to communications.
I'm saying is, I'm saying what you're saying, which is, wait a minute, come on, y'all, because I just saw that came across my crawl. It's 26 days until the election. Because John, they got to talk about where these people can vote.
Exactly, and this is a huge thing. And in a circumstance, and I'm going to say this, people won't accept this. They'll struggle with this. In a normal circumstance, because we don't live in a normal circumstance.
No.
In a normal circumstance, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris would appear together. and they would say, we oppose one another in this election. We have different stands on many issues, but a whole bunch of millions, tens of millions of our people are either threatened or actually hurting right now.
Mhm.
And we stand together to assure people that there's not going to be a big barrier between us. We're going to get people the resources they need. Democrats, Republicans going to work together. We're going to solve this problem, and we're going to address it quickly and effectively so that then we can get back to campaigning, and we'll disagree, right? But that's normal to do that. I want to emphasize that's not some wild, naive theory. That's what normal people do.
Yeah.
If you're down at the township level, if you're at the village level, if you're at the small city level, and you had a mayor and a city council, and they decided, and they had a disaster, and they started pointing fingers at each other and yelling at each other, people would vote them all out.
Yes.
Right? They would say, you all got to go because you're not mature enough to focus on the problem of the moment. Well, in a normal moment, Harris and Trump would appear together and say, we're not going to point fingers. We're going to get ourselves through this and solve this problem because it's immediate for people. Now, that's not happening. I happen to think Harris is better than Trump.
Yeah.
That's my sentiment. But what I'm telling you is that at the end of the day, we have a crisis of politics that prevents us from doing what ought to be easy. And I think this is why so many Americans are so deeply frustrated with our politics.
But that's why I think, I got a minute here. She should make the call. And if he doesn't accept it, not a problem. That's on him.
Right. I think, and you know what? I've interviewed her. You've known her. You've seen her. I think she would. I think she
should do it publicly. Just do it publicly. And
I
say,
think it's within her capacity.
Let's put this aside. And
let's start solving problems.
These are our Americans. These are not Democrats, Republicans. You can be whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right now, we want to get you some food, some water, medical care if you need it. We want to make you whole. We're going to do the best that we can. Mm-hmm. I think she should make that call because you know what? It makes her as big as I believe her to be.
I think you just said it perfectly because I do believe she is that big. Yeah. And I do believe that and this is something I was hoping for a little more on the immigration issue as well when we're talking about.
Well, that means you have to come back.
Well, but the bottom line is I keep saying that I honestly believe in our politics that if you speak to the better angels, you'd be surprised at how many people like that.
That's right. People, that's what people respond to. I mean, people respond to that in media. If they like you, even if they don't agree with you, they'll give you some space.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You're right. The last minute belongs to you, John. You got it.
Well, look, I think we're having a deep conversation here, one that's important. And at the core of that, it is one where I think you're hearing with both Santita and myself, a request, a plea that people who we believe in politics are better, right? Have better instincts. Mm-hmm. Embrace those instincts, right? It's smart politics. It's also smart policy. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is that when we're in crisis, we want a response to that crisis. We don't want finger pointing. We don't want blame. We don't want arguments. And I guess I'll sum it up in this last second we have. If you're in a car and you're arguing about directions, right, and you miss the turn, both the driver and the person who is given directions is angry, right? Mm-hmm. But if you slow down, get it straight, and actually make the exit, make the turn, you're both happy with each other. You feel like you actually did something.
Absolutely.
So that's where we're at. We're racing too fast. If we slow down a little bit, perhaps ideally at the request of Kamala Harris, slow down, make the turn, do that we need to do. I think we're all going to be happier.
Go past the conventional wisdom because they're not wise. They're just conventional.
Yeah.
One thing my father says, you can't be big and little at the same time.
Never saw him to be big and little at the same time. My wife saw him to be big.
That's right. Just be big. Be big. That's all. Yeah. My dear friend, John Nichols, my brother beloved, I love you and may God bless you. Thank you for sharing this time with me today.
Blessings to you and deep memory of Ethel Kennedy, the widow of Robert F. Kennedy, who passed today at age 96. She worked with him for economic and social and racial justice and for peace. She was a part of that vision of 1968 that was cut off. If she had come to the White House, she would have been a transformational first lady. But she did so much for Special Olympics and everything else in the rest of her life. And I know you will as well, send a special prayer to the Kennedy family for sharing her with us over the last, better part
100 years. I'm going
part of the century.
I'm going to reach out to them when I get off the air. I mean, because we do owe them. But I saw Robert Kennedy at an event this past summer. I said, "We owe you." He said, "Oh, no, we owe you." I said, "No, we owe you. And thank you. Thank your family." I don't have to agree with anyone's all the way. I don't agree with myself because I've changed my mind about a lot of things.
Same here.
But I do appreciate. I appreciate him. I appreciate his sister, who's been lieutenant governor. I appreciate all of them.
Yeah.
We owe them a lot, and that woman and that man produced public servants and good people. And I hope she rests easy. And I know this reunion that she's had with her husband and her son today has filled her with joy. And may she rest in eternal peace because she deserves it.
You're so right. And like you, I mean, I hope at my best, like me, she's a person of faith.
Absolutely.
And I think she went with great faith.
Absolutely. And, she was a godly woman now. She was that.
She was indeed.
She was. And you are. And you are my brother.
At our best.
I send you so much love.
And love to you as always.
God bless you. Bye-bye. Yep. God bless you, everybody. Have a great, great, great weekend. Much love and many blessings. Santita Jackson Show. Thank you, John.